consider it a great success. We continue to monitor those individuals that notices have been issued to. There is that likelihood that if they continue to transgress or commit further offences that they will be caught.
This is effectively criminalisation by default without going through the proper mechanisms that have been set out by Parliament to ensure that people's due process rights are protected.
Child abuse seems to be such a growing crime in this country, but for me, early intervention has to be key. The potential of someone looking at escalating their abusive behaviour, surely that means we have to do something positive to try and prevent it.
So is this a pioneering new way to stop people who are at risk of abusing children, or a waste of police time as no laws have actually been broken? One in 20 children in the UK have been sexually abused, according to figures from the NSPCC. From the viewing of indecent images online to large-scale grooming, recorded crimes have never been higher and the pressure on police never larger. It's all led to a debate about how to tackle this growing threat. We've been given exclusive access to a new scheme aimed at people who've come to the attention of police in relation to child sexual exploitation. Officers here in Hampshire are the first to use the programme, which involves issuing paper warning notices to people who display concerning sexual behaviour, urging them to change how they act and get help.
I've issued 3 now, and I've had one was accepted. And the second time I issued it to a female lady in her late 20s, and she was horrified, absolutely horrified, because she thought she was the victim. So why would the police come and knock on her door and telling her that we thought that she was involved with children? And you cannot have 15, 16-year-old boys in your house, for example, because we might get intelligence around that and people might question what you're doing with having them in your flat, for example. And so it was educating her around that, and age of consent, and a foot in the door for us as well to go and speak to them and have a look around.
And did that woman realise that what she was doing could lead her into hot water with the police?
I think so. I think once she realised why we were there and what the community were worried about in the first place to tell us around it, then yes.
And has she come to police attention since then?
No, no.
So this is the notice that Sergeant Waghorn and other officers here will give to someone who has shown concerning sexual behaviour. It explains the different types of abuse and has advice about where they can go for help. For sexual conduct, it says sex with anyone under the age of 16 is illegal. Don't take advantage of someone because of their age or vulnerability. And for sexual control, it is a criminal offence to try to control someone under 18 by using violence, intimidation, persuasion or aggression so that you or someone else can engage in sexual activity with them. Hampshire Police has handed out 54 of these notices in the last 2 years. Of these, 9 people have gone on to be charged with an offence.
Hampshire Police identified the fact that there was behaviours where we were investigating the actions of perpetrators, unfortunately not able to take formal action in relation to their activities, and recognised there was a gap in managing their behaviour going forwards.
Is this just a cheaper, easier alternative to arresting and charging someone?
No, this comes at the end of an investigation when we've explored all other opportunities to take positive action in relation to the opportunities that the intelligence or the victim or the information that's come to the police has presented us with.
Is this going soft on what is a very serious crime?
No, it's about making the best of an opportunity to manage their behaviour going forwards. Clearly, if further victims or further intelligence came to light that required robust police action, then that would instigate that action at that point, bearing in mind that at that stage all investigative lines of inquiry have been exhausted and no formal action can be taken.
But despite not facing any formal action, C5 warning notices may show up in an enhanced DBS check, the type of background search that's done if you want to work with children. Is it fair for this level of police involvement with someone who hasn't actually committed a crime?
Well, I think the public would expect us to use all of the information at our disposal, whether that be within police systems, within partnership systems, within their local communities, to consider the risks that individuals present. If there were other investigative options to take, at that point the detective inspector would say, well, maybe I need to apply more resources to this, maybe I need to think about this differently, maybe there's a formal court process that might be more applicable in these circumstances.
Whether the police should be giving people a warning notice when they haven't actually committed a crime is something that defence lawyer Anya Kervick is worried about.
The risk is that in receiving one of these notices and having it on your record, the employer of the future is not going to look behind it and behind the policy decisions that led to the police issuing this. They're just going to see that you've received a warning notice for child sexual exploitation and have serious concerns about your suitability for the role that you're applying for.
Almost 2/3 of the notices issued by Hampshire Police have been to people aged 25 or younger.
We want the police to be protecting children and young people, but from the approach taken with these warning notices, it seems that in reality what they're doing is targeting children and young people and issuing them to them in a way that's going to negatively impact their future and not actually protect the public in any further sense.
Hampshire Police says these notices are about engaging with people who can't be charged and would otherwise fall through the cracks in the legal system. But with police chiefs and politicians now trying to grapple with this crime, there are some who want to go further and stop jailing some low-level paedophiles altogether. Last year, Simon Bailey, the most senior child protection police officer in the country, faced criticism after suggesting some paedophiles who are caught viewing indecent images online should be rehabilitated rather than jailed.
My real frustration that so much of this is preventable.
Appearing before MPs in March, he explained his comments and the reaction to them.
We need to have a debate, and I was proposing some alternatives because less than a third are getting a custodial sentence. There's no rehabilitation. We need, as a law enforcement, to be able to give them the time and the space to target those individuals that you can't block and you can't prevent from viewing because they are so sophisticated, and we take the volume out.
Some senior politicians also think that rehabilitation can be an option and that there needs to be changes to the law so police have the power to act earlier.
I think it's great what Hampshire are doing, but they're having to do it off their own back because there is a gap in the law at the moment. And what we need to be doing is making sure that everyone, regardless of where they are in the country, has the protection so that the police are able to act when they see someone starting to groom or potentially looking at abusing a child. But also the public need the certainty that the police have the responsibilities. So whilst I commend Hampshire for what it's doing, we need the government to actually shift on this to protect all children.
What do you make of trying to get people into rehabilitation, potential offenders into rehabilitation, to try and change their behaviour before it escalates?
I get that when people hear about child abuse, about paedophiles, there is a very strong gut reaction of hatred and anger. But we have to accept that they are there in our society. And what we need to be doing is looking at ways that we can prevent them actually harming, contacting a child. That means we have to make some unpalatable decisions as a country, and one of those has to be an early support scheme when people are just thinking about abusing a child. They haven't actually acted on it yet. And the awful thing is, in this country, to be quite honest, to get state support, you have to abuse a child before we actually intervene and give you that.
But how would rehabilitation work? One of the places Hampshire Police points possible offenders to is the Lucy Faithfull Foundation. Based here in Surrey, the charity works to help people who have sexually abused a child or people that think that one day they might.
Hello, Stop It Now helpline.
The main way people get in touch with the foundation is through a helpline called Stop It Now, which gets 400 to 500 calls a month from people concerned about their sexual behaviour or the sexual behaviour of someone close to them. From here, people can enrol in group classes to help them cope with their feelings towards children and stop them offending.
People who look at sexual images of children are no different from everyone else in society, so they think that everyone else who does this must be a monster. And the first learning point that they have when they come to the group is to realise actually that the other people, like them, are normal people but who have made a very irresponsible, harmful decision in one part of their lives. And our task is to help them understand actually that there is a real child and there are real consequences, and to remove the scales from their eyes, for want of a better phrase, so that they can really understand the seriousness of their behaviour.
Does it work?
Well, the programme's been independently evaluated, and there's been 2 academic articles published, and we know from the Stop It Now helpline that people will often tell us about the practical changes that they've made. So we're confident that whilst there's no silver bullet that would work for everyone, that we play a really important part in protecting children from sexual abuse.
While Hampshire is the first force to use this type of warning notice, a similar scheme was already in place just up the coast in Sussex. In 2016, officers here started visiting the homes of people they suspected were viewing child abuse images online and issuing them with warnings. The scheme was abandoned after 1 year. The force told us it was a temporary measure which became less necessary as staff numbers increased.
My initial reaction was, ugh, what are they doing? You know, this is crazy. Why aren't they just arresting them? But actually, when you look at it practically, you can't arrest everybody. You just can't. But ultimately, I've put a lot of funding in the last 2 years into our online paedophile investigation team in Sussex anyway. So we've been able to recruit more specially trained officers who can tackle this area. Personally, I feel much more content with the fact that we're doing the proper kind of the officer bit. But I do understand the reason why they trialled it.
Both Sussex and Hampshire Police insist their warning notices are about protecting children and not cutting costs. The scheme being used in Hampshire is appealing for some.
What I'm hoping is with Hampshire Police issuing these notices, it stops people in their tracks. It makes them realise what they're doing or what they're potentially thinking about is a crime, and that's the best way to protect children.
But how the idea fits into the existing legal system concerns others.
The legal mechanisms you would use to challenge them are going to be expensive, very time-consuming and very unlikely to be successful.
Hampshire is the first force to start handing out these notices. We've been told that one other force is taking steps to bring in the scheme, and other regions are interested. Of course, this is just one tactic, but it does show that authorities are starting to think differently about how they tackle child sexual abuse.